The greatest individual scoring performance in NBA history, and not a single second of footage exists. How is that even possible? I mean, we have video of the moon landing, the 1932 Olympics, and even women's baseball from the 1950s. But somehow, not a single camera captured Wilt Chamberlain dropping 100 points? It's enough to make you wonder, did it actually happen? I'm your host Kyle, and welcome to Basketball Business, where we uncover the money moves behind the hardwood. Today, we're diving deep into one of basketball's greatest mysteries, why there's no footage of Wilt Chamberlain's legendary 100-point game, and why that absence has fueled modern conspiracy theories about whether it ever happened at all. First, let's understand the game itself. March 2nd, 1962. The Philadelphia Warriors versus the New York Knicks in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Wait, what? Yeah, you heard that right. This wasn't a home game for either team. The NBA regularly played games in random towns to try to grow their fan base. Kind of like how the NFL ships games to London today, except way less glamorous. The Hershey Sports Arena was primarily designed for hockey, and players hated it. Warriors forward Tom Hershey once said, "That godforsaken place. Everything there became permeated with the smell of chocolate. It was practically impossible to stay indoors. People felt sick. I was just dreaming to leave the place as fast as I could." Not exactly the setting you'd expect for basketball immortality. Here's another crazy fact. This game was between a mediocre Warriors team sitting 11 games out of first place and the Knicks, who were bottom last in the standings. Making matters worse, the Knicks starting center Phil Jordan was out with the flu, leaving skinny 6'9" backup Darrell Imhoff to guard prime Wilt Chamberlain. This matchup was so boring that only 4,124 fans showed up in an arena that seats over 8,000. And get this, most of them weren't even there for the actual basketball game. The main attraction that night was a halftime exhibition basketball game between players from the Philadelphia Eagles and the Baltimore Colts football teams.
So they didn't even play. They played in the small gym.
Through
The auxiliary gym.
The auxiliary gym.
They ugly. Nobody
The
got proof from
cafeteria
it.
gym.
Come on, Will.
See, this is the part modern skeptics don't understand. In 1962, the NBA was nowhere close to what it is today. Basketball wasn't even America's top 3 most popular sport. Baseball was king, followed by football and then boxing. The NBA was barely on the national radar. In today's era of 24/7 basketball coverage, with Instagram highlights, league pass, and round-the-clock YouTube analysis, it's almost impossible to imagine how irrelevant the NBA was back then. Even decades later, coverage remained spotty at best. Magic Johnson's legendary 42-point championship-clinching performance in Game 6 of the 1980 Finals wasn't even aired live outside of Philadelphia or Los Angeles. Imagine watching the finals on tape delay. How irrelevant was the NBA in 1962? Check this out. The day after Wilt scored 100 points, the Philadelphia Daily News had zero mention of it on their cover. The New York papers buried it on pages 11, 14, and 26. Why? Because none of the New York press was even at the game. Imagine that. No New York media covering a Knicks game. They were all in Florida covering Yankees and Mets spring training. That's right. Baseball practice was considered more important than an actual NBA game in 1962.
We talking about practice. Not a game. We talking about practice.
Beyond the NBA's relevance problem, there's the simple economics of television production in 1962. TV cameras back then weren't like the smartphones we carry today. They were massive, expensive pieces of equipment that required trained operators, lighting crews, and significant setup time. Broadcasting a game meant hauling truckloads of equipment to the venue, setting up multiple camera positions, running miles of cable, and paying an entire crew for the night. Networks weren't doing this for random regular season NBA games, especially one played in chocolate factories 85 miles from Philadelphia. Think about it this way. Bringing video equipment to film a Warriors-Knicks game in Hershey, Pennsylvania in 1962 will be like bringing an Apple Vision Pro and full 360-degree VR capture setup to a minor league pickleball match between Orlando and Miami being played in Gainesville, Florida today. No one's doing that because it makes zero financial sense. Even if someone had miraculously decided to film the game, preservation was a whole different challenge. Television in the early 1960s operated under completely different assumptions than today. Live broadcasts were rarely recorded at all, not just in sports, but across news, talk shows, and entertainment programming. When recordings were made, the tapes were incredibly expensive. We're talking $100 in 1960 money just for a single reel. So stations routinely recorded over old broadcasts to save money. This is why we're missing 97 episodes of Doctor Who from the late 60s and early 70s. It's why the only appearance of the Beatles on Top of the Pops, a huge moment in cultural history, is lost forever. And it's why most NBA games from this era simply don't exist in visual form. Consider this, Hershey did not have its own television station until November 1964, more than 2 years after Wilt's historic night. The infrastructure to broadcast or record such a historic event simply wasn't there. But wait, if there's no video evidence, how do we know the game actually happened?
For real, everything is documented. We have hieroglyphics from ancient Egypt, and still nobody knows where the film is.
First, there's the radio broadcast. WCAU in Philadelphia had Bill Campbell on the call, and while the original tape was recorded over, portions of the fourth quarter were preserved by fans who recorded it at home. In fact, two different recordings emerged years later, a dictaphone recording made by a Philadelphia fan capturing just the Warriors' possessions, and a reel-to-reel tape made by a college student named Jim Tresslease, who recorded a 3 a.m. rebroadcast of the game's final quarter. When these recordings surfaced in 1988, they perfectly matched the accounts that witnesses and analysts had been sharing for decades. The Library of Congress thought this audio was so historically significant that they added it to National Registry in 2016. Second, we have that iconic photograph of Wilt holding the 100 sign after the game. That photo wasn't taken by some random fan. It was shot by Paul Vathis, a professional photographer who later won a Pulitzer Prize. Third, and perhaps most importantly, we have meticulous documentation from Harvey Pollack, the NBA's legendary statistician who was there that night keeping the official box score. Pollack wasn't just any statistician, he's literally the longest employed NBA worker of all time, who stat kept from 1947 all the way to 2015. The man was known as one of the most accurate and consistent scorekeepers in professional sports. By the way, not a single player from either team has ever disputed that the game happened. If anything, they'd be pretty open about how towards the end, they were deliberately fouling to stop the clock and force-feeding Wilt more chances to hit 100. That's not exactly the kind of embarrassing detail you'd admit if you were participating in a hoax.
You got me.
Despite all the evidence, conspiracy theories persist. But think about this. Would the NBA in 1962, a league struggling for mainstream acceptance in Jim Crow America, really fabricate a record-breaking achievement for a black player? This was an era when the NBA maintained an unofficial black quota system, limiting how many African-American players teams could sign. Wilt himself temporarily retired at one point, citing racism in the league. He couldn't even buy a home in San Francisco due to housing discrimination. So the idea that a white-controlled league would make up a record for a black player in 1962, before the Civil Rights Act was even passed, makes absolutely no sense. If anything, the establishment would have reasons to downplay or dismiss his achievements, not inflate them. The fundamental mistake people make when questioning Wilt's 100-point game is judging it with hindsight. We look at the achievement in the lens of 6 decades of basketball evolution and can't believe no one thought to film it. But that's exactly the point. Nobody thought it was going to be historic until it actually happened. And by then, it was too late. Historians call this presentism, the tendency to interpret past events through the lens of current values and expectations. In our era of smartphones, social media, and constant documentation, the idea that a major sporting achievement could occur without video evidence seems suspicious or implausible. But flip that perspective. In 60 years, will people look at today's regular season games and wonder why we didn't capture them in full immersive 360-degree virtual reality? Will they doubt Kobe Bryant dropped 81 in a game because we only have primitive 2D video? Every era has its own standards for documentation, and judging the past by today's technological expectations just makes no sense. Wilt himself didn't even show up to the arena expecting to make history. According to teammates, he spent the previous night partying with 1 or 5 of his 20,000 women in New York City until 6 a.m., caught the 8 a.m. train to Philadelphia hungover, and nearly missed the team bus to Hershey. Not exactly the preparation of someone planning to set an unbreakable record.
I wish I could tell you, but it's like I don't do it. Like I don't do breathing. Like breathing just happens.
Whoa.
So there you have it. There's no footage of Wilt's 100-point game for the simplest reason. Nobody thought to bring cumbersome and expensive video equipment to a Friday night game in Hershey, Pennsylvania between two mediocre teams in an upstart league that most Americans didn't care about. The absence of video doesn't make Wilt's achievement any less real. If anything, it adds to the mystique. Like Babe Ruth's called shot or the ancient Olympic Games, some moments in sports history live on through testimonials and documentation rather than visual evidence.
I used to hate the fact that there was no video of it, but as time goes on, I think it kind of adds to the mystique of the game.
And maybe that's fitting for basketball's most mythical accomplishment, a performance so legendary it exists not in pixels, but in stories passed down through generations of basketball fans.
To Rockwood, into Chamberlain.
Thanks for watching this deep dive into basketball history. If you enjoyed or learned something new, please like, comment, and share with someone you think would enjoy. Subscribe to Basketball Business for more great content on the off-court moves that make the on-court plays. Until next time, this is Kyle with Basketball Business.